course, training that is organized. Right, then sick leave, I touched on it in the previous video, and after I had to watch it myself because I wasn't sure how much was recorded. But your sick leave, you qualify for 36 working days over a 3-year cycle, right? And the PAM makes it very clear that it's not about having 12 days per year, but you must see it as a 36 working day cycle. So you may take 20 sick leave days if you are ill during the first year of the cycle, and then that means you've got 16 days left, right? You're not limited to 12 days per year. And then of course, just bear in mind that you do not, why is my thing not moving here? Okay, let me just go back to that one. So you will get paid sick leave, and then any sick leave that you have at the end of the 3-year cycle will fall away. So you need to know when the leave cycle starts so that you can know exactly how many days you have, okay? So there's no banking of sick leave days. Unused sick leave days will just fall away. Then, of course, if you don't have any more sick leave, you can take unpaid sick leave, but this is very closely tied to temporary incapacity leave, right? So if you've exhausted the sick leave and you may fall ill again and you need 1 or 2 days, then that can be unpaid sick leave. But also we have the temporary incapacity leave measure that can kick in, right? And when that temporary incapacity leave kicks in, then it's often associated with the last, with pillar, okay? If you taught before 2000, most teachers will have capped leave, so you can tap into your capped leave if you require those additional days for sick leave. And then, of course, you can, according to the PAM, everybody qualifies for 184 unpaid days of leave, right? So that is why I mentioned, I'm just going to hop to the other slide again quickly just to show you there what I spoke about. If you have 36 working days, but you need more sick leave than the 36 days because you are genuinely sick, right? Then you can go on unpaid sick leave. But there are other conditions that will kick in as well, okay? That temporary incapacity leave is not, it's conditional. It's not just granted to everybody. The HOD must approve of it, and then of course the number of days that you can use the temporary incapacity leave for will also be stipulated. So it's not a general rule that everybody qualifies for temporary incapacity. You must apply for the temporary incapacity. If it's approved by the HOD must also indicate what how many days have been approved. And of course there is the pillar policy that can kick in, right? Your employer may have additional conditions. For example, your employer may ask for details about your medical condition, and then that is what you're going to have to provide. What is important to note now for this is you are not regarded as being on leave if you appear in court for anything, whether you are a witness, whether you are a defendant, whether you are co-dependent. Whenever you have to do any court appearances, you are not regarded as being on leave by your employer, and that is stipulated very clearly in the PAM. Then, of course, you're also not regarded as being on leave when you go on official training that is required by the employer or by SACE. Okay? I'm rushing this because I mentioned some of the points in the other episode. Your application for sick leave, you need to make application for sick leave. You must fill in your sick leave forms at least 5 working days after the first day of absence. And then, of course, you need to notify your employer that you are on sick leave. Now, this notification, the notice that you must give your employer, is not discussed in the PAM document. It's not even in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So it is just practice, common practice, standard practice for you to notify your employer And of course, your employer will have to specify how he or she would like to be notified. Okay, so that must be a policy that must support this application for sick leave. The time, what time you need to notify the employer that you're on sick leave. If you can't do it, then you'll have to get a relative or somebody to contact the school, but your employer, your principal must be notified. You must then just adhere to the policy on how teachers need to inform the school that that he or she is going to be absent. Okay, some schools will accept the SMS, another school will accept a WhatsApp. The third school may accept a telephone call only. So you need to follow the policy that you have at your school. I mentioned there that the policy applies that you have. Then I want to just step onto this part here. When do you need a medical certificate? You only need a medical certificate if you're absent for more than 3 days, and you do not have to specify the reason for your absence. You can just indicate that it's for a medical condition, or your doctor will just indicate it's a medical condition. Of course, if there's a pattern of absences, for example, educators stay absent when there's exam and they need to stay home to catch up with their marking. Let's assume that's the reason there's a pattern of educators staying absent whenever the exams are done. There could be a pattern, teachers are staying away certain days, Mondays, Fridays, or Wednesdays even, or the person may be absent. Whenever there is a trend or a pattern, then a medical certificate is required, because you will be notified that your employer is picking up a pattern, and the pattern can be justified, and then you will be required to submit a medical certificate. Okay. Also, you will need a medical certificate if you are absent on 2 instances during an 8-week period. So any 8-week period, you're absent for a day, 2 days, and then on another occasion, you're absent for another day or 2, consecutive days. In that case, the law is very clear that you must submit a medical certificate, and that medical certificate must indicate the medical reason as well. So it's important for our heads to understand that. Let's move on to the medical certificate detail. It must be issued by an approved health practitioner, so it can't just be by a sister at the clinic. It must in fact be a doctor or a specialist. The health practitioner must be approved as per the regulation. And then, like I said, your medical condition disclosures depends entirely if you are absent, and there's a pattern of absences on particular days or certain periods of the year, or you are absent for more than 2 occasions during an 8-week period. And when we speak about the on more than 2 occasions, it can be that you sick for, say, 2 or 3 days, and then in the next time in that 8-week period, you're only absent for 1 day. It doesn't matter. You were absent for 2 occasions during the 8-week period, and then you have to submit a medical certificate. And then, of course, temporary incapacity. If you do, if you are placed on temporary incapacity leave, then every single absence is regarded in terms of the 8-week rule. So as soon as your temporary incapacity leave starts, that very first day of absence will be recorded as the first day in the 8-week period. Okay, that is also very important to note, because sometimes the school will start losing track of the kinds of patterns that exist, and we know how important it is for us to keep track of those issues, right? Let me get to family responsibility leave. Family responsibility leave, in total there are 14 days, right, for everybody. And I'm going to speak about the special concession here for parents who have children with severe special needs. But generally, all teachers qualify for 5 days. When your child or your spouse or your partner is sick, you can use 5 days during the 3-year leave cycle. if your child or your spouse or your relative, immediate family member dies, there are 5 days for that. And then if you have urgent private matters that you have to attend to, then you have 4 days. So you have 14 days for family responsibility in the 3-year cycle. Okay. Then, of course, parents with children, a teacher who has a child with severe special needs, you qualify for 5 days family responsibility per year in your 3-year cycle. Okay, so 5 days per year over 3 years would be 15 days that you actually qualify for. Okay, and that I think is important information. Then, of course, all educators are granted occupational injuries and disease leave. So if you do, if you do get hurt or injured at work, then you may be placed on occupational injuries and disease leave, or you may contract a contagious disease at your workplace, and then you will also be granted this occupational injuries and disease leave, right? And the leave is for the duration of the period that you need to recuperate and then report for duty. So there's no specific days attached to this leave. It depends on the severity of your injury or the seriousness of the occupational disease that you have contracted. If the second point there, if a third party is involved, then the medical costs must be covered by your education department, by your employer, right? So if you get injured at work and that was the result of somebody else causing that, then your employer must cover your medical costs. Hopefully nobody gets injured at school. Okay, then leave for new parents. This part is important. When I say new parents, I'm talking about whenever a parent has another child, right? So it's important for you to know that, okay, I think most women, most educators, the females know you get 4 months maternity leave, 4 consecutive months of maternity leave. You also qualify for 8 days prenatal care. So when you need to go and see your doctor or your gynecologist, anything to do with prenatal care, there are 8 paid days that you qualify for. And then, of course, once the child is born, then the fathers also qualify for 3 days leave. Now, of course, the fathers can also take unpaid leave, but I'll mention that later in the talk. Okay, if there is during your 3rd trimester, the last 3 months of your pregnancy, and you have a stillborn or you miscarry or the baby is terminated, then you get 6 weeks paid leave. Okay, and then of course if you adopt, so for adoptive parents, when you adopt a child under 2 years old, then you qualify for 45 days adoption leave. And then of course we have surrogacy leave. I didn't fill that in because I got lost there. But surrogacy leave, that is when the mother would, when you commission somebody to carry the baby, so you will qualify for surrogacy leave, and you also get 4 months consecutive paid leave. Okay, so those are all the leave that you get as a new parent. It's a maternity leave, prenatal leave. You get leave if anything happens and the child is stillborn, or the child you miscarry during the last 3 months. And then of course for adoption leave, if you adopt a child, and also if you if you have a surrogate mother, then there are very strict measures to describe who the surrogate mother is, and also the nationality of the mother and the father. So at least in the surrogacy case, the mother or the father must be a South African. But you can read about that in the PAM. So let's move on to, this is special leave, right? These the leave that I spoke about, that leave is granted to everybody, you know. But in the case of special leave, this is when you require leave for these purposes, and of course, the leave will be granted subject to the HOD's approval or subject to your employer's approval. So there are 3 days that you can use for personal or professional or religious purposes during your 3-year cycle. If you are studying, you can be granted study leave, and that study leave can be with pay, without pay, or you can get just part payment, right? So it depends entirely on the HOD's approval at the end of the day. If you are studying and of course you're writing exams, on the day that you write exams, that will be a paid study leave day. And then, of course, you also get 1 day for every exam that you write, and that will also be a paid study leave day. If you, the last point that I make there, if you participate in sporting, cultural, and other events, you can be given special leave. You can be granted special leave. It can be paid leave, but it must have the HOD's approval. Okay, so if you're representing the country, you're representing the province in any sporting, cultural, or any other event, then you can in fact qualify for the special leave, and you can be paid during that period that you are absent from the school because you are participating in those events. Those are all the special leave. Then just these points, everybody, all teachers qualify for up to 184 unpaid leave days, but that is subject to approval. So let's say, for example, a couple has a newborn baby, father qualifies for 3 days paternity leave, but the father may feel he would like to stay home longer, so he can apply for unpaid leave, and if it is granted, then of course the father will be on unpaid leave. The father can also use some of the family responsibility leave, and that is all explained in the PAM. Right, so the new father doesn't just have to take the 3 days leave. There is this concession where you can get unpaid leave, and of course you can tap into the family responsibility leave. Okay, then another form of unpaid leave for educators is this. Now this was very interesting, and perhaps somebody can explain this, better than I can explain this. You can be granted unpaid leave for continuity of service, and you can have a maximum of 120 days. So this is when you have a break in service, right? So you stop working, but you didn't resign, you didn't leave education. So there's a break between the time when you're working, say, at one center and you need to report to another education center like a school. You are granted 120 days in that period, and then your service will still be seen as not unbroken service, right? Not too clear on that, but the PAM makes it very clear it does not apply to those educators who stop working. So an educator who resigns, for example, at the end of a term and then starts a new job at another education center, like another school, that doesn't qualify for this unpaid leave concession, right? Where this is granted to you to ensure that you don't have broken service. Because as soon as you have broken service, then your medical aid is affected, your pension is affected, and there are so many other things that are affected if there's a break in service, right? So this concession allows for that, but it does not apply to the educator that resigns. Even if you resign the one day and you take up a post the very next day, it's still seen as broken service. Therefore, you will not qualify for this continuity of service leave. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And I think I may not be explaining it well enough. And then this leave that is called special leave in extraordinary circumstances. This is leave without pay. So this means you don't get paid. You lose a day. It's not unpaid leave. Unpaid leave is just you don't get, there are no salary deductions. But leave without pay, the way I understand it, and perhaps we need clarity on this, is that you actually have a salary deduction. You actually lose money because you're out for the day. Right? So this special leave in extraordinary circumstances, this is when you stay absent and you haven't been given permission, it hasn't been approved, it's an unauthorized absence, so you will be on leave without pay. In other words, your salary will be docked, the way I understand it. And then of course you will also be on leave without pay if you are suspended because disciplinary measures were applied. So that is the section on special leave without pay. And I think that is also the end of the discussion.